Don't let that kid get you fired." The manager snapped, but Harper Quinn, a 25-year-old server at Cobalt Star in Seattle, couldn't tear her eyes away from Milo, the mute boy sketching a butterfly with a broken wing. In Harper's heart, the scars of her fractured childhood and addicted mother, an absent father whispered that she had to act. Each stroke of Milo's pencil was a cry for help, and Harper's sign language hands might hold the key. Could a small gesture heal an entire family? All right, dear viewers, stay tuned for a story that will leave you in awe. Take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always exciting to see viewers joining us from around the world. Harper Quinn never imagined that her dream would begin amid the broken fragments of a shattered life. Amid the clamor of Cobalt Star, the bar, where bespoke suits and silk gowns collide in half-hearted conversation, she remained quietly present. Not as part of that world, but as its silent observer, capturing what others rushed past. She was not merely a server, she was a storyteller in image as a painter of dreams on the gray, time-worn sketch pads hidden beneath her coffee and sweat-stained apron. Each night, once the patrons had gone, Harper would open her small sketchbook and leaf through her drawings. They were not landscapes or idealized portraits, but snapshots of humanity raw, fragile, haunting, a corporate executive drumming restless fingers on a table, eyes lost in an opulent party. An elderly woman, carefully made up, gently stroking her wedding ring as if it alone tethered her to memory. And a lone child amidst adults buried in their screens, the child's gaze pleading for someone to notice. To Harper, these were portraits no one requested but everyone needed to see. She drew because she could not help herself. Inside her whispered the fear that, if she did not record these moments, they would vanish just as she had almost vanished from the world years ago. Harper's childhood was an open wound. She once had a mother Delphin whose memory sparkled on stage like a fairy tale dream. But a bus accident stole everything. Delphine could no longer dance, and when her feet stopped moving, her heart lost its way. Addiction crept in like mist, quiet and relentless. At 6, Harper learned to count pills, to watch her mother drift into unconsciousness. By 15, her mother was gone, leaving a void that could never be filled. And her father? Vance, Thorntona name Harper mentioned only as a system error. He vanished right after the accident, as if misfortune were an address he could leave behind. He started a new life in Los Angeles, brokered million-dollar deals, posed in poolside snapshots, while Harper and her mother faded into darkness. No calls, no support, only a silence so absolute it froze her last hopes. No one taught Harper to draw. She learned herself by rewatching YouTube tutorials through sleepless nights when sleep was a luxury. She sketched from memory, from hunger, from the wind howling through the drafty rented room. She also learned American Sign Language not to pad her resume, but to listen to a friend the world overlooked. Ren, her deaf friend with bright eyes and silent stories, was the first to show Harper that silence does not equal invisibility. From him, Harper realized that art itself is a language, and she vowed never to let anyone feel as forgotten, abandoned, unnoticed as she once had. Because for Harper, each drawing was an apology to her passed away to stitch together torn fragments of life. She did not merely sketch others. She sketched herself in many gaisesto remind herself that she was still here, still fighting. And no matter how many chandeliers glowed overhead or how many doors slammed shut, Harper Quinn would find a way to turn a dark corner into a canvas of hope. Milo Pierce is an 8-year-old living in a world where words do not exist, not because he has nothing to say, but because his body refuses to give him the means to express those thoughts. Born mute, Milo grew up in absolute silence, a silence that surrounded him and inhabited him every day, every hour. But if quiet was all people saw, they were mistaken. For within Milo lies another world, one where butterflies drift over fields of wildflowers, where color speaks what he cannot voice. He does not speak, but he tells his story through drawings. Each sketch is a piece of his hidden soul, quietly knocking on the hearts of anyone patient enough to pause and listen. His deep brown eyes, still like a lake untouched by wind, came from his mother, Ivya woman Milo knows only from old photographs. Ivy died soon after giving birth to him, struck down by a cruel, unforeseen complication. Her death was the first scar in his small life, an injury he cannot remember yet always feels. That loss radiated quietly through his father, Logan Piercia, man outwardly aloof like a CEO but inwardly fractured by grief no one saw. 40-year-old Logan is the embodiment of success the world admires and fears. Founder of Pierce Dynamics, he is a tech titan whose projects have reshaped entire cities. Yet no achievement could erase his helplessness watching his son grow inside an invisible box, with no exit. Beneath the Navy suits and million-dollar meetings, Logan is a father struggling to understand a child who cannot speak and perhaps can't believe he's being heard. Every Friday evening, Logan brings Milo to Cobalt Star, a routine that seems like an attempt to connect, but is really two parallel escapes. They sit together, father and son, yet as distant as separate oceans. Logan buries himself in emails, meetings, spreadsheets, anything but his own heart. Milo draws. He always draws butterflies' wings bent, perched beside nameless flowers. These are not merely art, they are cries for help. They reflect a soul seeking a way out, fighting to be seen. Logan tried everything. He hired top therapists, enrolled Milo in countless language centers, even invested in an experimental implant hoping it could fix his son. But he failed. Not only did the technology falter, it drove Milo deeper into himself, pulling away from even the kindest glances. Logan came to realize this was not something to be cured. This was a boy who needed to be understood, not fixed. But insight alone wasn't enough. Action was another matter. Each dinner between them was a silent confession that no one dared speak aloud. Logan looked at his son and felt his own failure day after day. And Milo, with eyes full of unspoken truths, always looked to his father as if searching for a lifeline, a bridge between two worlds. Every time Logan turned away in silence, Milo slipped further into his own realm. A world of colors, of butterflies, of flowers, but no father. Amid his roaring successes and gilded accolades, Logan still hadn't found what he truly needed, a way to touch his only son's heart. Milo did not need someone to speak for him. He needed someone to stop, to kneel down, and to truly listen with all their heart. That evening, when Harper approached the familiar table where the Pierce father and son usually sat, she did not know that something inside her was about to change forever. Exhausted after a long shift, her wrists, aching, her eyes still caught the silent sketch before Milo, a butterfly with shredded wings. It was not beautiful in the conventional sense, but its raw truth took her breath away. She bent down, pointed at the butterfly, and softly said, "It's very special." Just 4 words, but Milo's eyes lit up. A small, shy smile spread across the boy's lips, and Harper felt as if she had just knocked on the door of a world waiting for someone to enter. She turned to Logan. He remained glued to his phone, expression rigid as if avoiding his son's presence. Harper inhaled deeply. She knew this wasn't her place to interfere. But she also knew the world would never improve if everyone only did the tasks they were paid for. "I know sign language," she began, slowly but without hesitation. "I can teach your son a few signs if you'll let me." Logan looked up. Weariness and wariness mixed in his gaze. "Are you sure? We've tried everything." His voice was no longer cold, but that of a father who had lost faith. Only exhaustion remained. Before Harper could reply, Milo's eyes spoke for her, hopeful, fragile, pleading for a chance to step out of his silent shadow. Logan nodded very slightly, as if fearful the smallest movement might shatter this tiny miracle. Harper knelt beside Milo, extended a hand, and gently formed the sign for butterfly. Her fingers moved through the air like newly awakening wings. Milo watched intently, then imitated her. Awkwardly, but with delight. He did not need applause. His expression was reward enough, a first spark in a room long overshadowed. Logan watched, and for the first time in years, set aside his phone without a flicker of worry. His mouth parted slightly, as if he could not believe what he was seeing. Milo was learning. Not through a device, not through expensive specialists, but thanks to a server who knelt down, daring to meet him eye to eye. In the weeks that followed, Harper seized every break to stop by their table and teach Milo a few more signs. Eat, happy, then dad. Each sign was a small step, but for Milo, it was an entire journey. His drawings began to include lone signs woven into his images like butterflies rising from the page, searching for freedom. And Logan, still clumsy but earnest, began to practice. Once, he signed "Good night" to Milo, and in that moment, Harper saw him smile genuine, not polite, not reluctant. However, not everyone viewed this with empathy. Giselle, Harper's manager, was a woman who believed only in profit. Every step she took was calculated and cold. One evening, amid the clang of pots in the kitchen, Giselle stormed over, her voice slicing through the hum of the espresso machine. "You're paid to clear tables, not to play teacher." Harper did not respond, but her heart clenched. Not from fear of reprimand, but because she understood too many people see something small like sign language as a game. But for Milo, it was the first butterfly, the first hope. And for Harper, if hope could be kindled with a few hand gestures, it was more worthwhile than any bill paid on time. Dear viewers, please relax or take a sip of water, and stay tuned, more surprises lie ahead. Comment 1 if you found this story moving so we know you're still here. Harper's life at that moment felt like walking a tightrope stretched between two chasms, duty on one side, dreams on the other. She strove for balance each day, but on some nights returning to her dilapidated Capitol Hill apartment, curled up against the cold with a broken heater, Harper just wanted to let go. Bills piled up, rent hung over her like a guillotine blade, and every message from her landlord cut into the pride she fought to keep. Giselle grew ever more domineering. Shifts were cut without explanation, her cold gaze sweeping over Harper's every step as if waiting for an excuse to fire her. The reason was clear. "You're too distracted by that boy, Milo." Harper did not deny it. But if that was the price of helping a child feel seen, then perhaps it was cheaper than anything life had ever forced her to pay. One night, while clearing the bar, Harper caught sight of Giselle's laptop left open at the manager's desk. She never intended to pry, but one subject line flashed like lightning in her mind. "Weekly report, Cobalt Star status, sent to V. Thornton." Harper's hand froze. V. Thornton, no mistake. That was her father, Vance Thornton, the man who'd abandoned Harper and her mother as if they were stains on his resume. Inside the email were cold, calculating exchanges, how to sow chaos at Cobalt Star, how to influence staffing, how to break major client relationships, all to undermine Pierce Dynamics. Thornton Global's chief rival. Harper felt ice flood her veins. Everything she'd tried to forget, Thornton's name, the betrayal, the shame returned in a living nightmare. She wanted to scream, but knew she couldn't. No one would believe a lowly server could be caught up in a corporate conspiracy. Yet anger smoldered within her, mingled with fear. What if Giselle discovered she knew? What if Vance learned his daughter worked at the very place he was trying to destroy? It was all too precise, too cruel. In that darkness, Harper found a flicker of light from her true friends, people who asked no questions of her past, only saw her for who she was now. Kiera, her high school best friend turned social worker at Dawn Harbor, reminded her, "You have every right to dream again, Harper, even if only through one small drawing a day." Theo, the lone chef at Cobalt Star with a heart bigger than any stew pot he stirred, would slip her leftover plates with a joking but earnest, "You're doing what no one else would dare, changing that boy's life. Don't let that snake Giselle snuff out your spark." Then there was Blair, a freelance journalist who often sat in a corner of the bar, quietly observing Harper and Milo. Once he offered to write their story, saying, "Your story and that boy's could headline." Harper shook her head. It wasn't that she did not want justice or recognition, it was that she feared the spotlight would cast shadows. The truth about Vance, about herself, would be laid bare. And if Logan discovered Harper was the daughter of the man wrecking his company, she dared not imagine what would happen to the fragile bond between her and Milo. Then Declan appeared, a new volunteer at Dawn Harbor. He carried an approachable smile, clumsy but sincere jokes, and a gaze that made Harper want to believe. Yet when he casually mentioned having once worked for Thornton Global, her blood ran cold. Part of her wanted to question him, part wanted to flee. Was he simply kind, or the next link in that calculating network? Harper could not be sure, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on her heart. Still, every time Milo raised his hand, signing a new word with bright, eager eyes, Harper felt a spark ignite within a hope, unlike the vague dreams that once shattered her mother. It was a steady ember, quiet but resilient, that if she kept believing in what was right, the past could be faced. And the future, however precarious, could be redrawn. Not with brushstrokes, but by arms learning to speak to the world. Harper never imagined she'd one day stand in a room full of Seattle's most powerful people, laying bare her story under the spotlight. When Logan offered her the chance to lead the Butterfly Voices program, she agreed, not out of confidence, but because she knew she couldn't ignore children like Milo. Yet discovering that Thornton Global Hair's estranged father's company was a funding partner sent her world spinning. Once again, the past she'd buried tightly reached up with cold hands to suffocate her present. At the gala launch, as Harper stepped onto the stage, overwhelm hit her like a tidal wave. She spotted Vance Thornton in the crowd, silver hair, distant Gazian, 20 years of memory surged up. Her mother's tears of despair, nights of gnawing hunger, her own 6-year-old pleas for, "Where is Dad?" that went unanswered. Her heart raced, her chest felt crushed. She teetered it not because the stage lights were blinding, but because the darkness within her had surged to the surface. She almost collapsed. But then she saw Milo, seated front and center, eyes full of trust. He raised his hand and signed encouragement, the very sign she'd taught him. No words, but it reminded her why she was here. Harper inhaled deeply. Old wounds still smoldered, but she understood. Sometimes you stand up not because you're healed, but because someone is counting on you. Her voice trembled at first, then strengthened as she shed layer after layer of the past with each sentence. She did not speak for pity, but so anyone who had ever felt abandoned, invisible, might know they still deserved a voice. Her own painful experiences, her mother's addiction, her father's betrayal no longer shackled her, but formed the foundation of a program that truly reached people's hearts. When her speech ended, the room fell into breathless silence. Then, like a bursting wave, everyone rose in applause. Harper kept her gaze on Milo, who clapped in his own way, signing applause. In that moment, she realized she had accomplished what she'd never dared to believe. She had turned her pain into something that could heal others. After the ceremony, Vance approached. He looked at her for a long moment, as if to say the words he'd never uttered in 20 years. But for Harper, the past could not be erased with a few belated apologies. She was no longer a child waiting for validation from the man who turned away. She didn't need his redemption, she had saved herself. Then Giselle stormed in, furious and venomous. All the tension she'd suppressed exploded into threats. But Harper no longer needed to defend herself. Logan stepped forward, calm and decisive, and exposed everything. His takeover of Cobalt Star and the espionage plot Giselle had concealed behind her polished management facade. The crowd murmured in shock. Giselle had no defense and was escorted out amid stunned whispers from those who once trusted her. Everything happened so fast, but relief washed over Harper like a silent breeze. Milo ran to embrace Logan. He didn't need words, just a small, heartfelt sign. Harper watched the father and son hug, then saw Milo turn to her and sign with tiny fingers. Superhero. No words could capture what Harper felt then, not pride, not victory, but the profound sense that at last, she had stepped out of the darkness not to be seen herself, but to help others finally be seen. Butterfly Voices did not merely become an educational program. It transformed into a Symbola silent beacon illuminating the souls that once lived in silence. From a small classroom in Cobalt Star, its free workshops now span all across Seattle, creating spaces where children with special needs no longer have to strive to normalize themselves, but are free simply to be who they are. Milo, now 9 years old, is no longer the withdrawn boy with haunted eyes he once was. He stands at the front of the class, eyes alight, teaching younger children how to sign their own names, their emotions, and the things they long to say but were never taught how to express. Harper has moved into a bright, peaceful apartment in Belltown Small, yet filled with light and calm. A corner of her home has been converted into an art studio. There, amid tubes of paint and canvases, she completed the painting she had carried in her heart for months, a brilliantly colored butterfly spreading its wings. Inspired by Millionaire, the moment his eyes first lit up learning the sign for butterfly, from the silent resurrection he quietly brought to her own spirit. Logan, too, has changed. He stepped down as CEO not out of confusion, but because he finally knew what truly mattered. Boardroom meetings and balance sheets have been replaced by the cheers of his son at Little League baseball games, by father and son trips to art exhibits, and by quiet moments when the two of them communicate simply through signs, no words needed. Between them, the wall of silence has been demolished. In the Butterfly Voices office hangs a framed drawing by Milo, a butterfly flying above three figures holding hands. Below, the sign for family. No signature need, everyone recognizes it as Milo's gentle affirmation of the journey they have traveled together, imperfect, yet whole. Vance has tried to help too. Emails and donations have flowed into the program, but Harper did not respond. She no longer holds the old grudges, coldness, bitterness, or pain. She simply refused to let the past dictate her anymore. Then, one evening, as she painted in her studio, he appeared. No longer in a powerful suit, no longer speaking like a man who is always right. Just a father with a bowed gaze and a voice thick with remorse. Harper listened quietly as he confessed his regret and spoke of her mother Delphinius, a woman of passion and light. She did not forgive him, but neither did she turn him away. In a whispered moment, she reclaimed her own freedom. She would not let him define her any longer. And so, for the first time in her life, the anger within her dissipated not because he deserved forgiveness, but because she no longer needed resentment to survive. Her friends, always at her side, continued to fuel this new life. Kiera officially joined Butterfly Voices to lead the community mentorship programs. Theo, ever witty and compassionate, opened a charity kitchen where warm meals are shared along with laughter and conversation. Blair's article, after countless refusals from Harper, finally published, reached millions. Their story spread, not for its tragedy, but because it reminded people that love is real. And Declinance, a source of Harper's doubt, remained in her life. Not too near, not rushing, yet his presence felt like the canvas being prepared for something grander and more enduring than a fleeting romance. Perhaps love, perhaps simply a companion to draw this journey onward. One afternoon, as Harper tidied her easel, Milo ran in with a fresh sketch, a giant butterfly soaring across a sky ablaze with orange. Beneath its wings was the sign, "Forever Love." Harper looked at the drawing, tears welling in her eyes, glittering at the corners. She signed beneath it, her hand trembling, "I love you too." And in that moment, as the sunset streamed through the studio windows, Harper knew she had achieved what her mother once dreamed. She had painted a world where everyone is seen not because they are perfect, but because they are deserving. Harper and Milo's story is no longer their own alone. It has spread, touching the hearts of those who once felt invisible. Thousands have learned ASL, hundreds of children have found their voices, and countless hearts have come to believe again in the power of gentleness. Because love, like a butterfly, never stays put, it always seeks to fly farther, and each time you share this story, you release another butterfly into the world. In a world that rushes and roars, the journey of Harper, Milo, and Logan reminds us that the most important things aren't in the words we speak, but in how we listen with our hearts. Sometimes healing doesn't come from grand gestures, but from an understanding glance, a small act, or an outstretched hand at just the right moment. Butterfly Voices is more than a program, it's proof that each of us deserves to be seen, to be heard, and to be loved. If you have ever felt invisible, carrying nameless wounds, remember, you are not alone. This story is for you. Thank you for staying with us to the end of the journey. If this story touched you, please leave a comment and share your feelings below. Don't forget to heart, share the video, and subscribe to our channel to help us spread more healing and inspiring messages. Because perhaps the next story will be yours.